Hello, I'm Conrad Bain. Tonight on
Talking Bird,
we're starting a special two-part show on a very sensitive and important subject. Now, we urge families, children, and parents alike to watch both of these informative episodes and then to discuss the problem presented, which is of deep concern to all of us.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, a great adventure took place.
Talking Bird, a special edition.
Hello and welcome to Talking Bird, the special edition, episode 91. I'm your host, Robert Zachary, along with my co-host, John Llewellyn. How's it going, John?
It's going pretty well. I'm doing all right.
Good.
I have a dog now. I guess I'll just get that news out of the way. So, having fun playing with my dog, having slightly less fun making lots of purchases for my dog.
Yeah.
But, yeah, going pretty well.
It's the ultimate furry iPhone. The accessories are... It's like the buy-in's low, and then all of a sudden they get you with the accessories and the visits and the squeaky balls. Have you picked out a bed yet, or is she a...
Yeah, we just got like a pretty basic orthopedic bed from Home Goods, because I should say we adopted a senior dog, as they say. So we got her an orthopedic bed. We just went to Home Goods and got something.
Yeah, I know. It's like Costco sells this like cooling dog bed or whatever, and we just had to get it because it's made out of that foam that you touch and it instantly feels cool. It's like, I thought, man, the dog's gonna love it. She's here on the floor. It's like she don't care.
The dog spends just a lot of time on our couches, just hanging out on the couch.
Yeah, that dog's got more. These dogs will end up with more beds than I have. It's just that constant like. Jockeying for position. Well, that was nice of you to give her couch props. I mean, she is a senior.
We gave her couch privileges.
Usually have to earn it.
We gave her couch privileges. We have not given her bed privileges, although this morning, she tried to get up on the bed and I had to push her off, basically. But, no bed privileges. But, yeah, she wants to be on the couch. That's fine.
Yeah, so... well, we have a lot to talk about today. I mean, there's been while we were off, and there was an Entertainment Weekly thing. There's been some Episode 9 stuff. There's been some Clint Howard news. There's been some toy stuff.
Clint Howard news.
So there's a lot of stuff. But to get this out of the way up front, we have an announcement that this is 91. So basically, this is our penultimate episode.
Yeah.
As the special edition. We've, it's people's schedules have been getting really busy, and John is taking on a new job, and he's got to be focused on that, and he just doesn't really have time to be like, doing a lot. There's a lot of reading comic books.
Yeah,
I know it's fun stuff, but it's still time, and you got to keep up with news. And he just felt that it was like, hey, he wants to give the same level he's always given, but he really can't because he has this exciting new job that he needs to focus on. And I totally understand it. And I thought, I was thinking a lot about what I wanted to do and my goals with the show. And I feel like we kind of achieved them already. And the idea of kind of like, getting another host or whatever, it just didn't really, or doing it, especially like doing it by myself, it didn't really seem really appealing. So I think it's just better that we probably just kind of like, put a kibosh on this, and we're gonna do one more episode in 2 weeks, and that'll be it. That being said, it's not like a thing where I'm like, okay, I'm going to scorch the earth and then salt it. I'm not
shut it all down.
Yeah, I'm not deleting any of the shows. It's still going to be up. I still enjoy, talking on the internet and whatnot. So I don't know what my plans for the future are. I definitely, either way, I'm taking a hiatus. But like I said, the channel is going to stay up. I'm going to kind of keep paying the bill on it, so to speak. So if I do have something, I kind of like either like when when Last Jedi comes out, definitely probably going to want to review that. Again, it's like there's a lot of different things I like to talk about, but to me, it's kind of like, this is a good opportunity to kind of like, we talk about Star Wars a lot and it's fun, but you also I kind of always felt that at some level, it was like we always run the risk of getting the point where we analyze it to the point where it might take a little bit of the fun out of the movies. And right. I don't necessarily feel like we hit that, but though if I look at my opinions and stuff and my assessments, and even before we were talking, I've gotten a little bit more negative about Star Wars, and I feel that that's totally fine. It's just, how long do I want to do that? It's that kind of thing where it's like,
right.
It's probably best if I pull back from doing a weekly thing about Star Wars, because it's like, it's like I'll read a comic and I'll be like, yeah, this is all right. I'll read a book and I'll be like, yeah, this is all right. And it's like, well, when we start getting into so far so good, the movies I've seen, it's like I haven't had to be like, yeah, I didn't really like that. I don't know if we're I don't know. I don't have this written down, so I'm just kind of speaking from the top of my head. I have like a lot of, I'm not entirely sure The Last Jedi is going to be great. And it kind of makes me a little depressed to think, oh boy, I have to do another couple months building up to a movie I'm not super excited about. So it's kind of like, this is a good time to kind of, make a change. And, I want to thank people for listening and everything that you guys have done. But, it's not the end of the world. There's tons of Star Wars podcasts out there. If you really, although I think we offered a service that was unique, there are other similar podcasts on similar subjects. And, if you want some recommendations, I'm not going to do them today, but, throw me an email and I'll give you some of my specially endorsed list of Star Wars podcasts. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that? That was kind of a mouthful.
No, just, I mean, this is really based a lot on my work situation. And as much as I enjoy Star Wars and enjoy kind of reading about Star Wars and thinking about Star Wars, it is kind of a lot of work to keep up with stuff for the show. And so I just, given my work schedule coming up, I just don't know that I'll have the capacity to pay enough attention during the week to make the show, to bring you the kind of quality two people talking about Star Wars podcasts to which you have become accustomed. Like it probably would end up being, us talking about stuff, and I will either have just heard about it for the first time, or like, I don't know, I skimmed this story because I had stuff to do Thursday. It sounds fine to me. I hope it will be good, right? And that's not really fun for people to listen to. It's not really fun for you, Robert, to have to like deal with in the conversation. So I think kind of taking, maybe not a step back, but taking some time to focus on work stuff, and Star Wars will always be there, apparently,
forever,
which is not something that we would have necessarily said a few years ago. But it's so we'll still be, Robert and I will still be talking about Star Wars with each other in some capacity. You all may not necessarily hear all of it though, because it won't happen every week,
right? And I think that's a good way to put it. And to get a little behind the scenes, a lot of this show, the prep of the show relies on John kind of taking copious notes and outlines. And I think I never asked you if that's your part of your process or just you felt it was your responsibility. But my point is, I'm not the kind of person to make copious notes, and they're actually pretty important to the show running smoothly because I will go off on tangents. So if he doesn't have time to do those, then I'm just going to be rambling 10 times worse than I do already. And so it's kind of like, you know what I mean? It's a package deal for the special edition is how I feel. And again, it's like, I would have loved to have gotten to episode 100, but if you throw in the Eagle Heart shows, we passed that a while ago. So, it's, Eddie, we can do the metrics however you want. But, that magic 100, we can go into syndication when they have, late night podcast channels online. Like, remember podcasts? Now from 2016. Talking Bird, the special edition.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was a joke. All right, let's talk about Star Wars. Enough of that.
Let's talk about Star Wars.
Whining.
Do you want to start with kind of the biggest news, or do you want to talk about the most recent news?
Let's talk about the most recent is the Entertainment Weekly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that for a little bit, but I do want to get on to the big news.
Eventually. So Entertainment Weekly, I think today, they just posted, I guess their issue is coming out this week or next. So they show it's their fall movie preview, and so they have two different covers, one with Rey, one with Luke. Who is the Last Jedi? Exclusive intel on the epic sequel. Rey's courage is tested, Luke Skywalker returns, and the galaxy bids farewell to Leia, which is kind of sad to say out loud. Yeah. But yeah, so they just have a lot more information about the movie, at least as much as Lucasfilm is willing to put out there. In some ways, it's not very much, and in some ways, it's kind of more than I would have liked for them to put out. So a lot of what's in here, in terms of the story, right, it's kind of, all right, well, we're picking up where we left off. Rey encounters Luke, and Luke is kind of like, who are you? What are you doing here? And Rey's like, well, I'm here so you could train me as a Jedi. And as we heard in the trailer, Luke is like, yeah, the Jedi are done. Sorry. It's like the end of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, right? Where Willy Wonka is like, all right, that's the end of the tour, and you don't win the prize. Goodbye. So there's a long article kind of talking about that from the story perspective. I guess I don't know how much of this I want to say, and for people out there who don't want anything spoiled, but
we're going to spoil the whole movie.
A lot of it, I think.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, to me, the reason that I say in some ways they didn't reveal very much is that it's kind of intuitive. Like if you just sat and thought about who these characters are, where they are at the end of or at the end of The Force Awakens, and Rey is there to train with Luke Skywalker, and then Luke says, all I know is that it's time for the Jedi to die. Like, how would Rey feel about that? And the fact that Rey, it seemed like, had this burgeoning paternal relationship with Han Solo in The Force Awakens, then he dies, and now she's with Luke, who's been kind of off on his own for a while, who didn't ask her to show up, right? And so that plays into it, and those are all things that, like, if you really sat and thought about, you could say, like, okay, well, I could see maybe this is one possible mindset that these characters could have, and that would help drive the story. And so they're not like revealing too much in that sense, but on the other hand, it's like, I kind of wanted to see that unfold in the movie rather than have like Anthony Breznican tell me 4 months before the movie comes out. It's like, I want to see that. I want to see those relationships unfold before me and kind of be there with Rey as she realizes, like, oh, Luke is maybe not into this whole Jedi thing anymore. Like, I want to experience that with her in the movie, and now I already know that going in. The piece of that, though, is, right, like, this is written in Entertainment Weekly. Obviously, they know that Star Wars fans are going to, be devouring a lot of this material, and that's part of their audience. But the other part of their audience is just like people who subscribe to Entertainment Weekly and just get Entertainment Weekly. I almost said whenever it comes out, but I assume it's weekly. Right, and so they're just interested in the different fall movies that are coming out. So like, oh, what's this Star Wars movie about? Maybe this one will interest me, and so they need to kind of give those people a little something.
Let me tell you something. Nobody subscribes to Entertainment Weekly on purpose. It's like a thing where it shows up in people's mailbox.
Well, I guess people who work in Hollywood do. I don't know.
I honestly don't even.
Dentists across America subscribe to Entertainment
Exactly.
Weekly,
That's
right?
about it. And they'll be getting this information. They'll be getting this out to the waiting room and sometime in November, so it'll be perfect.
Yeah. Right.
But it's like I always think of every time I pick up Entertainment Weekly. I mean, I know it's like when these things break, it's like I'm usually on EW.com and I look at their site, but like the magazine itself, it's like who, you know what I mean? It's like who's excited about like kind of slightly moldy information showing up at your doorstep. It's like you pick it up and they're like, oh, Netflix is losing Star Wars in 2 weeks. You'll have that thing and be like, yeah, I knew about that like 2 weeks ago. Right. What do I care about? The pictures are all pulpy and I already saw it on my iPad. I don't know. Sorry, I'm throwing shade on Entertainment Weekly.
Yeah, right. I mean, the sports equivalent would be right. The issues of Sports Illustrated that are there, and they're like the fall baseball or like the 2018 baseball preview, and you're like, yeah, it's almost the playoffs. Like exactly. We don't need to know who you think it might be good this year. It's definitely that, but for entertainment, I guess. Yeah,
and it's interesting. I find it interesting that they still use. Like,
I don't need to read about how excited Angelina Jolie is about Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow.
Well,
was she in that?
Yes, she was.
Okay, briefly. She was in that. Okay, I thought
that was a terrible movie. Oh, it was so bad, and it's like all my least favorite people are in it. It's like the only way. It's like, is Leland Orser in that too? You know who Leland Orser is?
Not by name.
So he, like, the minute you saw him, you'd go, "Oh, I know who that is." He was like in Seven. He's one of Liam Neeson's buddies in the Taken films. And he's like this, like, kind of like little guy, and I can't even do it in my impersonation because I want to keep it clean here. But he basically just screams and curses a lot in a lot of his famous movies. And it's like he's like my least. Every time he shows up, I'm like, he's gonna be screaming at some point. It's like when you see Tom Cruise. He's going to be running. You see Leland Orser in a movie, he's going to be screaming profanities at some point in the film. Except in the Taken movies.
So if he is in Sky Captain: The World of Tomorrow, he does not make the Wikipedia page.
Oh, damn it. For some reason I thought he was in that. Anyway. So well, we're off topic already.
Do you know, just one last Sky Captain: In the World of Tomorrow trivia nugget. Guess, do you know who wrote the novelization of this movie?
Timothy Zahn?
Close. You're closer than you think.
Kevin J. Anderson.
Yeah, our old pal Kevin J. Anderson.
Kevin J. Anderson.
So there's another it's not a Star Wars podcast. There's a podcast about the band Rush that I've started listening to because the people who make that podcast make a different podcast about bad books. So actually, I guess it's more about the Bad Books podcast. So apparently Kevin J. Anderson helped write the novelization of a Rush concept album.
Clockwork Angels.
And it's awful. But neither of these guys who do the podcast like knew anything about Kevin J. Anderson or his work. So they were like, the whole time they were talking about this book, they're like, I don't know if this is like Kevin J. Anderson doing it. And I was like, oh, believe me, I can tell you what kind of junk he writes. It's not all junk, but he's not my favorite.
So what you're telling me is that there is already a semi-popular Rush podcast. All right, I'm gonna check that.
I don't know how popular it is.
I'll check that off my list as potential things I can do. All right, no Rush podcast.
Yeah.
No, I can't do I hate Kevin J. Anderson because I don't hate him. I just don't really enjoy his writing.
Right.
Yeah,
I just don't really enjoy it.
Well, again, we're not like, of all this Star Wars, and I'm not talking Star Wars, but yeah, I did see that he had done this, adaptation of one of their albums, and I just thought to myself, I can't imagine. I mean, I think there was a comic book even. It's like it was Rush's Rush's attempt to try to get back into their progressive rock, whole concept album thing, and I don't know. I did see him live once. I heard some of those songs. I don't know what the story is, but I can't imagine that the meeting of the minds of Neil Peart and Kevin J. Anderson bore any kind of exciting fruit.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, Entertainment Weekly.
So enough about Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow. Right. With that,
once we made that announcement, now we're just giving up trying to even be a Star Wars podcast. let's just forget it.
This is the second to last of our Star Wars podcast and the first of our Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow podcast.
Yeah, all of a sudden, we figure out, I'm quitting my job. We're doing Sky Captain 100%.
Yeah.
You have to explain it to my wife.
A movie I haven't even seen. I just like referencing, actually. So back to The Last Jedi. Do you have any thoughts about what I said? Do you remember what I said?
Yeah, no, I do. And that's the thing. It's, it's really strange that they're marketing this movie, and maybe it's not strange because it's indicative of the times, but they are heavily marketing this movie about their personal journeys. There's this idea maybe Finn isn't, again, spoilers abound. I don't think these are really spoilers because it's being disseminated really quickly on Twitter. But, this idea that, Finn may not want to stick with the Resistance, and Luke is this hesitant Jedi, and, this Rose is a character who has to, rise up from her situation or her fears or whatever to achieve whatever it is she's doing in this movie.
Whatever it is that you.
Well, I mean, the point is, shouldn't they be showing planets and excitement and kind of hinting, basically, if we're going this analog to the previous trilogies, it was Star Wars, and then it was Empire Strikes Back, and that was that's all you really needed to know. The Empire's getting their revenge, and The Last Jedi, even though it's much more mystical and kind of in some ways, it's much more of a provocative title. I think maybe that stuff should be unsettled when people come into their emotions should be kind of like an unknown quantity when you go to sit down in the theater in December, and they should have maybe gone off of this idea Canto Bight. There's going to be this kind of planet. There's going to be this kind of planet. The idea of dealing with the interpersonal issues. Also, it kind of raises this annoyance, and we were talking before we started recording, this kind of arrested emotional development, which again, it's in the Ron Howard pun in some ways, but this of characters in these movies. Okay, so now we're actually the fact that Finn doesn't know whether he wants to stay with the Resistance is going to be a concern of this movie. That's going to be the thing he's going to resolve. And to me, that's a little strange, especially since the characterization. I felt like that had been settled, and maybe he would be going on to something else about I don't know. Maybe that's just something that happens in the first 10 minutes of the movie or whatever. But it kind of makes me think a lot about what I don't enjoy about the current Star Trek movies. Is that it seems like the characters don't develop. They every movie is them kind of rehashing the problem of the first movie. In the first Star Trek, Captain Kirk doesn't ever think he can live up to his father, and then he basically saves the galaxy, which he gets the captain he becomes the captain of the Enterprise. Well, then they go to the next movie, Into Darkness. Well, he's still not feeling he can live up to the example his father had, and so he's unhappy, and so therefore he loses the Enterprise. And it's this thing where it's I don't know, maybe I don't go to this kind of movie for this kind of emotional development, because I feel like they're these kind of big movies are kind of poor stewards of that. I mean, that was the whole plot of the third Iron Man movie, it's like that became, Tony Stark would have panic attacks because of what had happened in the Avengers. And it's like, okay, so this is his emotional journey. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, well, I would say that was a little bit more interesting because Shane Black's an interesting writer, but it was kind of an odd thing. But then again, they go the next Marvel movie and they're still dealing with the same kind of problems. It just feels like they're not moving forward, kind of like we're going to be rehashing, Luke never questioned in Empire like maybe I shouldn't be a Jedi. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. He just kind of stumbled forward. I mean, he was impetuous, of course, and that's a personality flaw or whatever. And I don't want Rey to be Luke. It's just, I mean, we don't know. It doesn't really, this EU stuff doesn't really talk that much about Rey, except for the fact of like the old adage, be careful about waiting to meet your heroes because you might not be happy with who you meet. I mean, and I guess that's a fair mini assessment, going into this movie. It just feels like every time, and there's another disclosure, it just feels like, man, this movie's gonna be a bummer, and not in a good way. Dark is one thing, but kind of just this. Like, oh, here's all your old favorite, all your favorite heroes, and they're not like the cool heroes you remember. They kind of are grumpy and old. And it's just like, oh, really? We're not going to get excited Luke, or engaged Luke is going to be in the last scene of the movie or something? Is it going to be, Han Solo, when he comes through that door, it's like he's Han Solo and he's doing his Han Solo thing, and it's immediately recognizable, and it was fun and it was exciting. Mm-hmm. But if this idea where this movie is going to like take a step back and have a lot of these characters, I guess if they were in Crisis, I kind of would have liked to have seen them in maybe a new Crisis, not this idea that we rehashed in Maz Kanata's castle, whether or not Finn wants to stick it out with his friend or he wants to go hide. I mean, they never even quite establish, what Finn's ultimate plan was, he's got parents, maybe he'd like to go find them, that kind of, like, he should have a real mission, and it should be, maybe I've got siblings, maybe I've got, family, maybe I have a planet that I want to go to, not like, do I want to stick this out or not, and then somebody shows up to show them, and it feels like they're, if this is how it's going, then this Rose character, she's got to find, her strength in herself, and then she apparently shows Finn his strength in himself, and then it's always about one person showing another person, kind of, I don't know. I guess I'm much more of a fan of the concept of like self-discovery and friendship than the idea of someone else kind of showing you the path. And that's what I'm getting the feel from what I'm, obviously we've never had a full trailer. I don't have a full synopsis. I'm just winging off of what I've seen here. So, yeah, I don't know. It just feels like, oh, well, I guess I'm going to have to take a leap of faith or this and hope that he made this something interesting and this isn't just kind of treading water. But maybe I'm reading too much into it.
No, I mean, with Finn too, right? He starts off the movie as a stormtrooper, and then he realizes very early on in the movie, like, oh no, I don't want to do this anymore. But he never kind of really answers the question of, so what does he want to do? Right? Like, he's not a stormtrooper anymore, so what is he? He mostly hung around, I think, he mostly hung around the Resistance to help rescue Rey, essentially. That's been done. She's off on her way. So now he's kind of a character with nothing to do, right? He like perfectly served the story in The Force Awakens in helping get Poe Dameron off of Starkiller Base, and then basically help getting Han and Chewie into Starkiller Base to rescue Rey. And then that's kind of like, what do you do with that character anymore? He fulfilled his purpose, twice over in the first movie. And so both of those things are done. You don't want him to just play the similar role over and over again. So who is he? What does he do as a character? I think that's something that Ryan Johnson, I'm sure, has an idea of what he had an idea that he's putting in this movie, but for the character, that's also, he's kind of like, well, I'm not a stormtrooper anymore. I didn't really join the Resistance. I just helped rescue Rey. Is this a group I want to be involved with now? Like, he has to answer that. But yeah, to your point, like, it kind of, the answer of whether that works or not kind of depends on what they do with him. And in this movie, and then in episode 9, what you don't want is what you alluded to, which is, have him kind of be questioning this in both episode 8 and then again in episode 9, where like they didn't, you can go on an arc, and the arc can last across 2 movies, but like if episode 9 he's starting off at the same place as he did in episode 8, then it's like, well, what was the point of having him in episode 8 at all? Like, what did we go through all this for? So yeah, I think, as we'll talk about later, that will fall to the people making episode 9 to, in some way. Like, in some ways, Ryan Johnson doesn't need to worry about that. That's more of an issue for the people making episode 9, to make sure that it's not just this like recursive, like, oh, we're going through this again, kind of feeling for him in that movie.
Yeah, and again, I can't. We're gonna talk about a lot about story in episode 9 pretty soon, but yeah, it's just it is very indicative of the fact that Lucasfilm didn't really have a full plan in mind when it came to this new trilogy, which I guess I can't imagine. I'm sorry, I can't off the top of my head think that they ever really said that they did anyway. So it's not a thing where I'm like, oh, you lied to us. It's not like Lost, where they kind of BS'd us for 5-6 years about, oh no, everything's well in hand. I think a lot of times, a lot of this is the kind of like you said, it's that problem where it's like all they really wanted to solve is, how do we bridge 30 years? How do we, clean the uncomfortable taste of the prequels out of fans' mouths and stuff, and create an exciting movie that kind of encapsulates everything that was good about Star Wars, and get people their butts back in the seat. And then, so now they've kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say they painted themselves in the corner, because I don't know the story, but I feel like they kind of didn't set up a lot of threads going forward. And so basically this is almost like, and I guess in some ways that's the way Empire was. Empire did a lot more. Mm-hmm. Although I'd say the Empire did a lot less world building, considering, like, there wasn't like the kind of the Mos Eisley thing where it kind of dumped you into this, place where you're like, oh my God, I've never seen anything like this. Although I think Canto Bight, which is the casino planet, which I'm a couple episodes again, I made the thing, I confused it with Crate, which is, I guess Crate is where this red dust, the speeders and the walkers, that's going to be on Crate, which I don't know. Mm-hmm. I don't know. We don't know anything about that. I don't think so. That's still a kind of, we don't know if that's where the final battle is going to take place, or the first battle of the movie, or how many battles will there be. But another thing in this EW thing is that they're talking about this there's a disclosure that Luke apparently considered Ben Solo to be the chosen one, and that he basically kind of pulled an Obi-Wan, where he just kind of made the same mistakes his own mentor made, which it's a little kind of a bummer, because it's like, well, it's a new way of looking at Luke, which I would think like going forward, he would have learned from the mistakes of his forebears. But again, that kind of smacks a little bit of the EU expanded universe Luke from the books, who seem to be almost, supernatural in his abilities to mediate be able to see everything 10 times faster than everyone. And he could see the perils coming forward, and he was always the calming influence in the expanded universe. In this Luke, the fact that you're finding out like, oh, he made the same dumb mistakes that everyone that came before him did, is in some ways I find interesting, but it is a little bit like, oh, you're just kind of repeating from the original trilogies, or the prequel trilogy, that the mentor doesn't right. realize that his mentee, or what is it, his Padawan, or has is going down right. the dark path until it's too late. So in some ways, it's a little same story, different day kind of situation. It really depends on how they they deal with it.
Yeah, like part of me is like, are we going back to this chosen one thing?
Yeah.
Like, I thought we kind of resolved that, but I guess not. Or maybe it's a testament to like everyone thinks that the chosen one is in their time, that they're living in momentous times, and then that they're not just living in like, oh no, you're in the aftermath of when the chosen one was around.
Exactly.
I don't know. But the other big revelation announcement, I'm not sure what you would call it, from this Entertainment Weekly thing is these new caretaker aliens on Acto, Achto, whatever. They're basically like tiny little nuns. They're these, so as Ryan Johnson describes them, they're these sort of fish bird type aliens who live on the island. They've been there for thousands of years. They essentially keep up the structures on the island. They're all female. I wanted them to feel like a remote sort of nunnery. And they can communicate with Luke in, quote, a blubbery sort of Scottish fish talk. But they're not thrilled. They mostly just tolerate Luke's presence there on the island. So yeah, I mean, they absolutely are in like medieval nun costumes. They kind of look a little bit like the dinosaurs from the TV show Dinosaurs, but slightly better. But yeah, that's the kind of aesthetic.
It is
look to these aliens.
There is a kind of Baby Sinclair aesthetic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little, this idea that they're nuns or whatever. It's very, and then if you see their garb, which looks something akin to maybe like a Shaker or a Mennonite kind of very
very simple cloth.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of them wears a necklace, which might be a little bit flashy for a Mennonite, but. It's that kind of thing. Like, does it kind of a little on the nose though? Isn't it kind of like, okay,
yeah,
they have to. So they're space nuns.
Like, I wanted them to be like nuns. It's like, okay, so that will make them look exactly like nuns.
Yeah, like, okay,
yeah, it is a little on the nose, right?
But I mean, obviously this movie's 2 hours and they've got to establish this. I doubt they'll be dwelling on this too much. But it's an interesting. Yeah. It does kind of answer the question of like. What was Luke doing for all those years by himself? I mean, it kind of, in some ways, diffuses kind of the like, wow, what kind of things would a person do on an island, to like not go crazy when they have nobody to interact? And it's like, no, there's these poor things that look like puffins. Yeah. There's these Scottish fish talk people. So it's like he hasn't been alone. So he's been kind of just, he's kind of like just kind of squatting on this land or whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I'm looking at Screen Rant's coverage and they said the village may be the first Jedi temple. I'm like, oh, I didn't know. I thought they kind of thought it was. So now it's like,
oh,
I don't know. Some people say
well,
it's not.
I mean, I guess technically if if we're to believe, I don't even know what material at this point, if the Emperor kind of took over the old Jedi Temple on Coruscant, the knowledge of what the first Jedi Temple was may have been lost. It may have even been in dispute, right? Like if people set up separate Jedi temples across the galaxy or whatever, how do you arbitrate the claims of who was first? So that it may be within the universe. It may either be contentious or it may be lost to, the Empire, basically taking over the Jedi Temple. So
yeah, I forget.
Yeah, so that's probably just them hedging their bets, just in case some other story. They're like, this was the first Jedi Temple now.
Yeah, I forget if this was a thing that showed up on Rebels or one of the books. Did somebody say that like the whole thing about the Sith being able to, Palpatine being able to kind of obscure the Jedi's detection of him until it was too late was the fact that there was like a Sith.
Yeah.
There's like a Sith temple at the underneath the Jedi temple on Coruscant or something like that.
Yeah. It's something.
Know. I don't remember where.
Yeah. Like if they had just gone down to the basement, they would have found this whole Sith like labyrinthian network of tunnels and stuff, but they just there's no reason to go in the basement. We live up here now.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean I guess it'll be all explained in the movie or whatnot. I wonder how much time they're really going to spend on here. I mean, if it's going to be a good chunk of the movie is going to be her training, and because they talk about this, apparently these cave paintings and the possible, which people have assumed is the Journal of the Wills, kind of sitting on a some kind of a makeshift bookshelf. I mean, I guess this is going to be, more kind of Jedi dogma type stuff, kind of, akin to what Yoda, we didn't really, although I would say that Obi-Wan, Alec Guinness did a pretty good job establishing all you really needed to know about the Force, in my opinion.
Right.
It being this kind of this amorphous religion thing. They didn't really talk about
it's very succinct.
Yes, you don't need to talk about are some people Force sensitive? Or is it because people have microscopic animals living inside of them, or is it because of So it'll be interesting to see if they opt to implicitly expand the dogma of this Jedi stuff that they're doing, or they're going to kind of play it kind of fast and loose and kind of keep the mystery. Although, with all this, him being on the supposed the first temple and the books and the cave paintings, I mean, who knows? It'll be interesting. It's like, again, anxious because of this whole thing where, will midichlorians be mentioned, or will they conveniently be dropped in lieu of some other thing that they're going to do. But it'll be interesting. Yeah. It'll be interesting for sure. Also, there's a
it will.
What is this other one? It's like, okay, yeah, I've already kind of covered the Finn wants to leave the Resistance, and Finn and and it sounds like Poe kind of doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't sound like we haven't heard much.
He's around.
Yeah, apparently he has some kind of kinship to Leia, and they'll be doing a lot of interacting, apparently. But other than that, we're not really getting a kind of. And I had said this before, like Poe's kind of an interesting character, but I don't think he has he's interesting because there hasn't been a lot, except for that comic, which I eventually just kind of gave up on.
We both stopped reading.
We don't know a lot. And the fact that we know he was born on Yavin, and because of the Shattered Empire comic, he's basically a pilot. He's the analog, he's the analog. He's the pilot, he's not going to be like a Luke pilot. And I always say that he's very much like a Wedge or a Biggs, if Biggs hadn't bought it in A New Hope, and they hadn't like kind of cut off most of Wedge's dialogue. He never had any character development. He's just in cockpits for the entire trilogy, except at the very end. If they wanted to kind of give a little bit more of a backstory to a Rebel pilot and kind of personalize it, I think you would end up with kind of a Poe Dameron character. I don't think he's a Han or a Luke or a Lando. I don't think he's occupies that narrative space, you know? I think he's just he's going to be a fighter, and we're going to be seeing him, you know, flying around in ships and, you know, doing that kind of stuff. I don't think he's, you know, I could be wrong, but nothing here has said that, oh, like he has something that he needs to, you know, there's not a problem for him.
I mean, he's another character where it's kind of, he doesn't have anything to do anymore, right? And even to the point where we've talked about this, but he was supposed to die in that TIE fighter crash initially, early on in The Force Awakens, and Finn was going to truly be on his own, and then they decided, like, we'll bring him back. So yeah, like, what does he do now? He's, you know, he's made, the purpose he serves is, as you say, he's kind of the link between the new cast. You know, he was, his backstory now from the Shattered Empire comic, right? That he was the son of Shara Bay and Cass Dameron, and he, you know, who were there at Endor, and so he grew up living near one of these forest trees, and, you know, he's very, you know, Leia trusts him a lot, and, you know, that's kind of who he is. But, you know, story wise, like, The Force Awakens didn't really give a sense of an arc to that character. He's just kind of around, and yeah, he's a good pilot, and he just shoots stuff out of the air, and he's really good at it.
And he calls everybody buddy.
That's kind of who he is, and he's not change. He didn't change, and so, you know, again, to get back to the conversation about Finn, right? Do you try to impose this kind of emotional story arc on that character, or do you just kind of let him be? Yeah, he's just a really good pilot, and we'll use him as needed, and we'll just let him be what he is.
Yeah, and
I don't know.
It's an interesting way of doing it. I mean, apparently it's, you know, it might be more of a consequence of the way that Lucasfilm circa 2017 wants to tell a story. I mean, I think it's like, I mean, the truth is, I feel like they are definitely trying to sidestep the idea that there's going to be any kind of romance or something in these movies. I haven't really, and in some ways it's kind of interesting, because if I'm reading this distillation on Screen Rant, where they kind of talk about the fact that Rose Tycho, which is Kelly Marie Tron's character, is that she is very much a hero. She worships them, kind of worships. I think they idolizing. That's the term. They're idolizing him, which is a strange thing for a Star Wars movie to have. And they've obviously already set precedent in Force Awakens, you know, with the idea that Luke and Han and Leia and Chewie, they were all legends. That these younger characters are re-experiencing. But it's like, okay, well, we kind of, you know, again, don't know what we're going to see in December, but it kind of feels like, well, we already established that. That was kind of a fun way of, it wouldn't have been necessarily how I would have done it if I was writing this, but I'm not writing it, and it's an interesting vector to get people back in the story. This idea that that, you know, Finn and Rey are ciphers in order to kind of reintroduce the Star Wars galaxy to the viewer. But now we're going into this thing where now, like, oh, everybody now main characters of the movie are going to be like worshiping other characters as if they're like movie stars or movie heroes or somebody you read about in a book. It feels a little bit too meta for me, you know, that kind of, like, they didn't need to go in and do that, you know, that kind of, and again, who knows the degrees that they're really going to do. Maybe it's just a thing like, oh, you know, I always look at you guys and think I want to be doing what you're doing, and then they say, well, you're with us, lady, and that's all they say, and it's not that big of a deal. Now, if it's this thing where she's being led around in the nose, like, I never thought I'd ever get a chance to be around you guys, and it's just like constant.
Yeah,
it's going to be annoying. It's going to be like that thing where does Lucasfilm feel like they need to have, a substitute for the audience in the movie? Is that kind of where they're like in the future where they're like, Rey and Finn in some ways, at least in the early part of the movie, kind of symbolized, could represent the audience, and the fact that like you're literally thrown into situations where you don't have your bearings, and up is down and down and up, and stormtroopers have morals all of a sudden, and Han Solo's kid is a bad guy, and it's like, okay, well, these kids will be a good way to they're going to ask the questions that the audience are going to ask. Now, will Rose be, again, is there stuff in this movie that they need kind of more of a cipher of a fan of the viewer more than the fan to see, to understand it better? Or is this just going to be kind of just a kind of a thing? Like, oh, well, that's how we're setting up this character because we want to establish that, in the grand scheme of Star Wars, she's kind of a nobody who ends up being a somebody. And it'll be interesting. But, she says, so I don't know who they're quoting, but they said that she views as Poe Dameron as, quote, super cool. And it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's kind of an odd, it's an odd take on it, but I mean, whatever.
And it's something that there are already, that kind of hero worship, hearing stories about these people within the universe. That's something they're already doing in other media, right? We talked about that book that's coming out about, the people sitting around the campfire telling, myths and stories they've heard about Luke Skywalker. Like that idea is already kind of out there, and then for them to do that also with Poe Dameron to some degree, it's like, all right, well, yeah, it's been done by Lucasfilm, like it's been done by Star Wars. Maybe tweak it. They may need to make sure that they tweak it so it's not different, so that it comes off as different or fresh and new a little bit, I think. Yeah. And again, not everyone who sees the movie will have read that Luke Skywalker book, but they need to keep it a little fresh, I think.
Yeah, it's just kind of I don't know. It feels like it's moving backwards, but then I guess another. We get to finally get to see an external shot of Canto Bight. Kind of, I think it's an establishing shot of the casino. I mean, it's definitely looks like a Star Wars building. I guess this is all that stuff they did in Dubrovnik. Apparently Rose and Finn are on an undercover mission, but hopefully maybe they'll keep that kind of close to the vest, and then we can.
I'll say the building also kind of looks like Valerian and Laureline's ship in the movie Valerian.
Oh, really?
We've talked about that.
Okay. It's Monte Carlo. What is it? Which, despite previous descriptions calling it Monte Carlo in space, suggests it's something a bit more Vegas-like. So I don't know. It's like it's not a high-end casino. So I don't know what that really means, but there you are.
I guess Vegas has some high-end-ish casino, like Vegas when, like Vegas now, where every casino / hotel is just like a shopping mall, or I don't know.
I've never been to Monte Carlo, so I don't know what that's like. I just always assume that's where James Bond goes between missions or something. But apparently Finn will be getting some stuff to do because he'll be a pilot. Apparently, again, like they say, the Battle of Crate looks like it might appear in the final act. This is with the Gorilla Walkers and the Red Dust and these speeders that look like they kind of scoop the ground a little bit. I don't know if that's something they're supposed to be doing or something. It's probably that's probably, now that I'm thinking about it, that's probably I think only one ship scrapes the bottom or something. That's probably Finn not quite having his hands knowing how to fly his ship, that's probably, we probably just saw him.
Yeah.
But apparently he gets to learn how to fly. I mean, we established in Force Awakens he doesn't know how to fly, but apparently he gets some knowledge on how to do so. I don't know, since this is taking place right after the end of The Force Awakens, at least the early scenes, I don't know if this is a thing where maybe the movie itself starts out immediately after and then goes over a few months where he's able to learn how to fly, or it's like kind of like Star Wars trope where they just let the guy with a lot of enthusiasm pilot a ship in a major battle. Like, oh, Luke? Yeah, this guy, he's pretty good. He's flown around Beggar's Canyon. All right, we're having a final battle. Here's a ship, you know.
Yeah.
But, you know, they might not have an option. You know, they might be, you know, there's not going to be, apparently, you know, when the planet, I forget the name of the planet that was destroyed by the First Order, you know, which was the Galactic Republic, you know, I think the fleet got taken out too. So they're kind of probably dealing with limited manpower or person power in the battle. So they probably have to be like, everybody's got to get in a ship. So, I mean, that's good. At least he's got something to do. It's not going to be you know, he gets to fly a ship, and I guess that's cool. So have you had a chance, have you seen these Praetorian Guards?
Yeah, these were kind of leaked or hinted at or semi-revealed through like Legos a while back, and then now we actually get photos of what they look like in The Last Jedi. I don't know, to me they look a little too, I mean, honestly, even the real characters look a little too Lego-y to me, or even like if the Devo red flower pot hats were a full costume, that's kind of what they look like to me.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not, it's just like they're simple in the sense that like it's just red all the way down, obviously, but I know it's almost like they're too busy in terms of like ridges and lines and like vacuum form stuff. I don't know. I haven't been that high on them, but what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, and there's a guy I know who he collects he's like a Star Wars collector, and he focuses a lot on the Imperial Guards. Like that's his collector. And he wasn't jazzed about it. And if like a guy who's into them, he was like,
right.
And I was kind of like, I wanted to know what his take was, and I was kind of like, well, I felt that way too. The armor itself, kind of reminds me of like, and sometimes you can see them at Barnes and Noble. I forget the name of the company, but they do like these really ornate, like versions of like stormtroopers kind of done up like they are a samurai, you know, with the armor and stuff. It kind of reminds me of that, but then what it actually mostly reminds me of, which is kind of not great, is it reminds me of James Caan and Rollerball. You know, they look like Rollerball with weapons, you know, like you know, you can see their faces in Rollerball, but it kind of like, it's that, you know, very bold, I'm not, that color of red is just like, you know, very vibrant, and the kind of the shoulder pads and the helmet. Yeah. It just kind of makes me think of Rollerball, which, you know,
like I like this. I like the face mask part of it, but not the helmet on top. Like, it's just too many different elements competing with one another, I think.
Yeah, it's that, again, the Red Guards were more of a had kind of found their popularity in the EU stuff, because really, except in one deleted scene where one of them puts I think they call it a force pike in the face of Vader, because I don't know if you've ever seen those deleted scenes where there's one where like Vader actually chokes Jared because he won't allow him to see the Emperor, and that's one of them pulls a thing on him. That's the only time you ever see those guys do anything. So they're kind of, that type of guard is kind of an unknown quantity, because they've always basically left it to your imagination. Whereas even in Rogue One, the guards are just kind of standing there while Anakin takes his bath or whatever, and just kind of just stand there. And you know, they leave in Jedi, and the ones that were kind of like the precursors to them in Revenge of the Sith, which were in blue. They get like Yoda takes them out in half a second. Although I don't know if they're supposed to be the same. So it'll be interesting if they're doing a, if this is gearing up some kind of Rey, Snoke, or Rey and Kylo Ren kind of battle, where will these guys factor into it? Will we see Luke and Rey take these guys on?
Yeah. Well, so reading this thing online, I mean, you're spot on with the samurai reference, because that is apparently what Rian Johnson wanted. He told the costume designer, make them look kind of like samurai, but then he also said, he wants them to be able to move, to feel like they could, step forward into battle, or into a duel at any point. Whereas, the guards in the original trilogy look just kind of formal and ceremonial. Like these are their costumes, but they have these pikes, but they don't actually do anything with them. Whereas in this movie, he wanted them to seem like, they could come up and start doing battle with someone. So, I mean, I don't know that you do that unless you are going to have that happen. Otherwise, what's the point? It just looks busy and distracting. So, yeah, I would bet that we see some kind of confrontation there.
I mean, I think that's good. I mean, they've already kind of, again, we haven't heard any stories about who the stunt coordinators or anything like that for the film, and and this is just coming to me, so I haven't even researched it. But with the kind of the martial arts of the Finn and I forget the name. I think colloquially they call this for sort of the traitor or whatever trooper that fights Finn. Yeah. Which I thought was as much as I wish it had been Phasma, because it would have given her something to do. It's a great little. Right. Every time I watch that sequence, I'm like, that's a great, and it has like touches of martial arts in it, which had kind of been started to be established in the prequel eras with Nick Gillard, and then of course Donnie Yen has he really kind of broke it open to be like, hey, we can have this kind of stuff explicitly in a Star Wars movie, and it works. And it's like, so I guess my hope is like, maybe there's like maybe there's going to be some cool like martial arts. They obviously don't have like energy weapons, at least from first blush. It looks like they have blades. So it'll be interesting to see if like, maybe there'll be something. And we know that at least Daisy Ridley's been doing like, crazy CrossFit type stuff. She looks like she's bulked up or whatever, or has a lot more muscle mass. So I don't know if that means it's just going to be a lot. I don't know if that necessarily means martial arts or whatever, but I think there's going to be a lot. The fighting is going to not just be sabers. There's going to be a lot more physicality to it. It's not going to be kind of, when I rewatched the final battle in The Force Awakens, as much as people like to go, oh, she just picked it up and she's all of a sudden knows what to do. It's like, no, he was injured and she was fighting to the absolute edges of her being. It's just, she lucked out basically kind of things. And even you can kind of tell, she had to like, he was at a deficit and she was using everything she had. So now she's going to be more powerful, hopefully. And it means they can have more exciting, kind of like the I mean, one of the things people always knock about, people always knock on the prequels, but one of the things they did is they always came up with this idea: you need to have a kick-ass, lightsaber battle, not just an important one where a lot of, important things are being said. It's like, the fighting's pretty important in the prequels too, so I'm kind of, if they dip into that, I don't consider that a bad thing to take away from the prequels. The fact that it's 2017 and let's have, a physically exciting battle. It doesn't have to be like when you go back and watch, the original trilogy and you think everybody's kind of moving through molasses, because it's like, well, it's mostly Mark Hamill. They can't CGI a face over him and, hire a stuntman like they did with Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor.
Right.
So I'm actually looking forward to, even though I'm not super jazzed on the design, I'm actually really looking forward to like seeing these guys actually do something. So let's hope they are.
Yeah.
Apparently we're not going to get
much. So they get a chance to actually do something.
Exactly. We're not going to be getting a lot of Snoke in this, apparently, so I'm all right with that. It's not really my... I don't spend a lot of time like going, who is he? who is Snoke? What is he doing?
Yeah.
What is he thinking about? Is he thinking about me? It's like, whatever.
Right.
He's the, the Emperor was only the Emperor, like, in Return of the Jedi. He was just like, well, he's kind of like the boss. And the story didn't deem that it was, you get a hint of him, obviously, in Empire, but he's not essential to the story. He's just he's the puppet master moving the pieces, and then it all comes to fruition in the third. So I honestly feel that, like, if they're holding off just because of the narrative, there are some limitations narratively of Star Wars, and at least I feel if you go too far out of it, it all kind of collapses. And one of them is they probably need to save something for that third movie, and the Snoke reveal, and I honestly, my feelings is he's not anybody. He's Snoke. He's not Tarkin. He's not Jocasta Nu. He's not Jar Jar Binks. He's not the soul of Anakin Skywalker. He's Snoke. That's...
Yeah.
And I think that'll all come out, in the wash in Episode 9, but who knows? Actually, since I brought up Episode 9, should we talk a bit about... Should we move on to the next thing and do some Episode 9 talk?
The biggest news has been that Episode 9 is getting a new writer. So Colin Trevorrow had been working on Episode 9, the director, with his longtime writing partner, Derek Connolly. Derek Connolly, his work with whatever they hired him to do, he did it. And so they brought in a new writer. This isn't necessarily a case of like being replaced or like getting fired from the thing, but it was, they just made the determination that like, we want someone else to take a crack at these scripts. So given how closely Connolly has worked with Trevorrow, you could maybe say that is a sign that they thought they needed to bring in someone else. But this kind of thing also happens all the time in Hollywood. So he's being replaced or augmented, supplemented with a guy named Jack Thorne, who's a British TV and film writer. A lot of his credits have come in TV. So he wrote for the show Skins, a show called Cast Off, which I'm not familiar with. He's done, I guess, 3 feature films of note. One is A Long Way Down, which is based on a Nick Hornby novel. The Sandman, or I guess 4 movies. The Sandman, which is based on a Neil Gaiman novel. War Book, which is just a movie about, hey, what if the government, the governments periodically run these simulations for what they would do if they were attacked, with nuclear weapons. Here's a movie about the government simulating what they would do if they were attacked with nuclear weapons. And then his most recent one that's coming out is called Wonder, which is also based on a book. That is a book based on, or it's a book about a boy. IMDb says a boy with facial differences, who moves to a new school and he enriches the lives of everyone he meets. Basically, it's surrogate Jessica Parker and Owen Wilson, I think, play his parents, and so it's very like feel good.
Oh wow, yeah.
Story.
It's okay.
Very like soft, like kind of
It's okay to be different. I'm different. Look at my nose.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Gosh, I hope.
Oh,
I don't know. You think he'll be all right? Yeah. He also wrote the play, the Harry Potter play that came out, I don't know, a year or 2 ago. That was quote unquote the official 8th story. So it basically J.K. Rowling, I almost said J.K. Simmons. J.K. Rowling had an idea. She was like, this could be a play. And then Jack Thorne is the one who actually wrote it up as a play. And he also wrote the script for a production of Wojciech, which is a Polish play that John Boyega was in. So there's some connection there between Boyega and this guy Jack Thorne. And most interestingly for me, I didn't know that this was happening until I read about this guy. Apparently they're making it, or they made a TV anthology series that's coming out later this year, where every episode is based on a different Philip K. Dick short story, which sounds kind of interesting. And they're getting, pretty, I mean, not huge names like Tom Cruise isn't in it, but, decent names to be in it. Anna Paquin's in one. What's his name from Breaking Bad's in one. Janelle Monáe is in one. And so he wrote the first episode of that based on the story of The Commuter. What's interesting to me is this is interesting for other reasons, but so Vanity Fair, this was covered elsewhere, but then when Vanity Fair wrote this up, they called him Fantasy's Secret Weapon, which, Vanity Fair, obviously they have their big Star Wars issues every year now where they kind of unveil these new characters and the costumes and everything. But, it seems like it would be more Entertainment Weekly or someone else that would be, kind of carrying the company line regarding this guy and this movie. But, they want to, Vanity Fair was the one reassuring readers, basically, they were the ones that Lucasfilm went and talked to reassuring their readers that, no, this guy's really good. And he's going to make sure the movie is really good. He's Fantasy's Secret Weapon. So it was just odd to me that Vanity Fair would be the outlet to do that. But, as I have gone through his credits, as I referenced earlier, this kind of thing happens all the time in Hollywood. Switching writers is pretty common. But, this kind of takes on an added dimension considering Colin Trevorrow's most recent movie was apparently awful. And the experience with the Han Solo movie where they had to replace the director, which then added to the Rogue One experience where they had to replace the director and the writer for the reshoots. So, this, on the one hand, this isn't a big deal because this happens all the time. But on the other hand, maybe this is a big deal because it's a sign that the script kind of needed a lot of work and they didn't trust Colin Trevorrow's buddy, the Monster Trucks writer himself, to do the job. So, I mean, what do you think? Is this a big deal? Is this not a big deal? Are you interested to see what happens? Do you think this is just kind of much ado about nothing? Like, what's going on here?
I mean, it's kind of a big deal, but only because everything is kind of falling into what we've kind of, except for, The Last Jedi, which has still managed to be somewhat, because of Rian Johnson's, comments on the story by the people in the movie has been slightly controversial, but not nearly as controversial as, say, the Han Solo movie and people's anxiety about it. But I mean, it just reiterates this kind of, whether it be true or not, this kind of perception that somehow Star Wars is kind of losing its bearings, and they're having a way harder time establishing stories or stories that feel authentic to the universe. And it's like that thing where they're constantly revising, and I mean, Rogue One, like you said, it ended up, they spent a pretty penny. Those stories went away pretty quick, but it is true that, I forget, I'm blanking on the guy's name. I think it's right in front of me, but who's the guy that they brought in for Rogue One at the end?
Tony Gilroy.
Tony Gilroy.
Yeah.
And apparently, that was a bigger deal than people, realize, is that he kind of fixed, quote unquote fixed, although I would say that, you've been, now that Rogue One's on Netflix, I gather you've been watching it.
Yeah, I just watched it yesterday or the other day, and it definitely feels like, oh, okay, this is a movie where they just like inserted some scenes in the beginning to try to explain things, and they like it's clear, like, when at least when that they brought in someone else to do reshoots and rewrites, you're like, oh, okay, they clearly didn't think that people like would be able to follow what was happening, and B, like they didn't think that, they didn't like the direction that these characters were being taken in, so they wanted to reconfigure everything. So yeah, you can kind of tell, like, oh, okay, this is a movie that was kind of pieced together from, multiple different angles, and they brought someone in to like kind of insert their stuff you have like the Gareth Edwards part sandwiched in between this stuff at the beginning and the end. Is kind of how I watched it the other day.
Yeah, so. and I think that's my concern about this is like, yeah, are we going to have a situation kind of something like akin to, like the Hobbit movies, which, as time goes on, the critical assessment of those films get worse and worse and worse. I even saw somebody make some kind of clickbait article that was about, the Hobbits are far worse than the prequels, and of course I would agree, and I agreed that from the get-go. But
yeah,
the big
right, I didn't know that was a question.
I don't know, it was up for debate. But I mean, one of the big problems with the Hobbit movies, and it's, and I've talked about this before when I watched like all 27 hours of the behind the scenes, which is actually more interesting than the movie itself. But by the time they reached that second movie, they had to shut down production, and because they didn't have enough film done to make the 2 movies, so they ended up making 3 movies because it was the only way they could hit their timing, because the theater, like, it's coming out Christmas every year. They had to basically create a 3rd movie, and that's the big problem, because now everything is a trilogy, and of course you wouldn't want to do a saga movie and not have it be trilogy. But my point is that it almost makes me wonder, it's like, oh man, it's like so much getting dumped. Of course you have the first and foremost concern on everyone's mind is how are they going to deal with Carrie Fisher. I mean, the fact that Leia won't be in this without, offending people, without, creating problems with, like, say, CGI characters that are for people that have just recently died and freaking everybody out when they go to the theater, which they say they're not doing, and I'm pretty sure that they're not. But it's they're not going to do any of it. Who knows? But that's the thing. I feel like they're obviously coming up against a problem in this story that they've had multiple people come out and try to fix, and they haven't even rolled camera.
Right.
My only hope.
So in that sense, it's probably good that they're getting this taken care of now, right? Rather than while they're in the middle of filming and realize, like, oh, this really isn't working.
I feel like they're also kind of between a rock and a hard place with the Trevorrow situation. I feel that if the Han Solo thing had gone as planned, Trevorrow would probably be out on his keister after what happened with his movie. Because I feel now that they've already fired a director, if they remove another director and then they have one basically kind of get sidelined, it's going to be a situation where it's like, people aren't going to want to do Star Wars movies because they're like, why would I want to do a Star Wars movie when I'm just going to have my work taken away from me and done by somebody else? So they won't be able to attract big names. Therefore, then Star Wars becomes like, we're going to get, I don't want to name any directors, but these workman-like directors that just make whatever, and they don't really have followings, but they just go like, well, I make movies, and it's like, people come out of the theater and they go, well, that was a movie. They're not awful, but they're not like directors that you end up knowing their names and you follow their work. It's just kind of like, eh. And I feel like that's kind of where Star Wars is going to end up eventually anyway, that it's not, they're going to slowly, and I think that might have something to do with the fact that why they've never announced the third anthology film, that I feel like as time goes on, they're going to want to de-emphasize the creative teams necessarily, and maybe re-emphasize their in-house people, kind of, that they already kind of have, quote unquote control of, or that they know that going in, that they're like, you're not going to be, this is, unfortunately, this is Star Wars by committee at this point, because there's too many people and there's too much expectation. It's like, they're not going to want to take a chance with an R2 or something. And I mean, I think that was partly why, Trevorrow was attractive to them. He did he'd come from indie film, but then he did a very, 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 very commercial, big budget movie that, you know, made gobs and gobs of money when everyone thought, oh no, it'll be hot for 1 week and then nobody will care. Now, I don't like the movie. I thought it was terrible, but I don't think that's singularly his fault. I think it was partly because of the story wasn't interesting, but yeah, I mean, I just, like I said, I think going forward that these movies, they are going to de-emphasize the director in these films, and it's going to be a bit more piecemeal. They are going to bring in writers. They are going to, they're going to, get the story as close as it can, so they don't have to turn around and spend $40 million near, the date. It's scary when a movie in an untested genre or whatever, that like a new franchise, when they go, well, before we even rolled an inch of film or whatever video, before we warmed up the hard drives on our red cameras, we already had a release date. Then that's
right.
People, there's a million stories about movies that had a release date before they ever finished their script, being kind of a big mess. But there's so many. Lucasfilm is the designs are done. They already they know what all the battles are going to be. That's the thing. It's like, it's just them kind of filling in the dots. This isn't like a thing where they're, creating something out of whole cloth. It's like they already actually have all the problems that they need to solve up on the wall. It's just a matter of finding the right person to, solve the problems. And I wouldn't be surprised if you hear about, there'll be another, there'll be another change. There'll be another writer. I mean, Rogue One, it was like Gary Whitta, and then Wheats, and was there another one after Wheats?
I guess Gilroy,
yeah. So, there was like 3, maybe 4, if I'm forgetting, writers on that movie, and it, it didn't preclude it from being an enjoyable film. Like you've said on the Twitter, it's definitely not a stick to your ribs. Rogue One is not a stick to your ribs kind of story where you're like, that's going to be a narrative. Like, people won't be making movies that reference like, oh, well, I remember Rogue One, and there was something in Rogue One I really liked, because people always name check Star Wars and Empire as being like, well, this movie's kind of my Empire or whatever. Like, I don't think anybody's going to be positively going, well, this was kind of like our Rogue One, unless they're talking about a spin-off. It's not going to, there wasn't a lot of narrative stuff. And I think that's a byproduct.
Right. Artistically, they're not going to be like, oh.
Yeah. Artistically speaking. And I think that's a byproduct of this kind of piecemeal kind of storytelling. And again, now we've crossed the veil of, not only are we doing that, but now we have, with the Han Solo movie, they've got movies that are, half directed by one guy, and then they're two guys, they're fired, and then some other person comes in, and it's like, he's going to have to he wants to put his signature, but we don't know how much of that film is being, reshot, how much of it's just they're using their takes. And again, it's
right. Yeah. Back before Lucas sold Lucasfilm to Disney, he'd been talking for a long time about how he wanted to bring in other directors to do, different Star Wars movies and kind of put their personal stamp on it. Even though, in reality, he kind of had a hard time giving up the reins for Jedi and even for Empire Strikes Back to some degree. But so when he sold Lucasfilm, it was thought that was going to be kind of the direction that they were moving in under Kathleen Kennedy and Disney. That they were going to hire a different director for each of these movies. They were going to do these different genre explorations and let just kind of see what would happen and let these directors kind of do what they wanted. And maybe to a slightly lesser, maybe to some extent, The Force Awakens, but it really seems like Episode 8 Jedi is going to be really the only true version of that idea of like we're going to get this auteur and hire him to write and direct the film, and he's gonna make the film, the Star Wars movie he wants to make. Now maybe it comes out later on that they fired his editing team and brought in their own editors to cut the film, or who knows. but for the most part, the rest of them have been kind of maybe more what I would say are kind of producers movies or studio, not quite studio movies, because that has a specific kind of connotation, but Kathleen Kennedy is the one running the show. The producers are the ones, not just her, but the people who work in the story group and whomever else she, has involved in these things, are the ones deciding like, yeah, we like the way these dailies are going. No, we don't like all this improvisation that's going on. No, we don't like the way the script is heading in this direction, that this character is taking. No, we don't like this ending. We want to beef up these characters, and so we'll bring in someone else. It really is the producers making those calls, for Rogue One, for the Han Solo movie, for Episode 9, possibly. And so, Episode 7, you had J.J. Abrams, but he's a producer as much as anything else. And I think there was probably too a sense that like we weren't going to mess with whatever J.J. Abrams did because we trusted him not to go too far afield, but also, we want to put out a good first impression that we're going to let these people make the movies they want to make. But, Rian Johnson may be then, the last of that kind of auteur-driven Star Wars movie, which, is both good and bad. When it works, it works. When it doesn't work, you get the prequels, which are, too long. They're too overstuffed with stuff. Dialogue's not very good because no one else was really brought in to fix it. It needs a lot of editing that, didn't really happen because, the guy just kind of did it himself and hired his friends to do it. So, when that kind of auteur style works, it works. And when it doesn't, we've seen how that works in Star Wars, but yeah. And I think this is something that we've come back to a lot over the course of our episodes. So I don't, we don't need a huge discussion, but it just kind of reinforces this point that, the producers are the ones calling the shots on these movies. And, that, I'm still ambivalent. I'm still not totally sure how I feel about it.
Yeah, it's a kind of funny thing where they keep talking about like, oh, this Last Jedi is just going to be an Empire retread. And it's funny how in some ways behind the scenes it's more of a retread of the same, well, not that I've heard anything that Kathleen Kennedy was unhappy with Rian Johnson. If anything, her assessments have been glowing. But I will say that Empire kind of took Star Wars and kind of turned it on its head a little bit, but in like a weird overcompensation, George wanted to pull it back into kind of more of a toy and kid friendly kind of narrative. And in some ways it's like they're having, he didn't want to let the reins go for another director. So it's kind of interesting that like on 9 they're getting, they've brought in writers and they brought in, that kind of situation where it's like, maybe this is her again, maybe this might be her preemptive thing. It's like, don't make me come and wrestle this movie away from you because I will, so let's get this done. If you need a writer, if you need somebody to come out and fix this, let's do it now. So maybe in some ways it's not like a Marquand situation. And I mean, and really, it's like when I watch all the behind the scenes stuff, and I've still never gotten around to reading that Rinsler book on the third movie. But when I was a kid growing up, it never really made sense that Marquand had directed the film because if you watch all the behind the scenes stuff, it's always George. He's always there making the decisions. And it's like, well, I thought the director made those decisions. Well, not on this movie.
Right, even to the point of like telling Marquand where to put the camera.
Right.
Like they got down to that. Which Kathleen Kennedy hasn't done yet, but she's basically hired people who will put the camera where she wants it, essentially.
So let me when you wrote these notes here, now I think you made a typo.
Okay.
Did you mean Clint Howard was going to be in a Han Solo movie, right? You didn't mean that.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Yes, no.
Because I didn't hear. I was like, well, that's
Clint Howard.
That's some episode 9 news I didn't know about. But yeah, I guess.
Yeah, no.
I kind of
the real biggest news is Clint Howard.
Yes, and that's the thing. It's like the minute I heard Ron Howard was going to be taking over this Han Solo movie, I thought, well, how long till Clint Howard's is announced to be in it? Although I don't think Clint Howard has been in every Ron Howard movie, but he's not like...
No, he hasn't.
No, but Clint has, has a long, storied history working in low-budget genre entertainment. And of course, he's people know him from being in the original series. Did you ever get to that episode? I know you did an abort.
I did.
The Tranya episode. Tranya.
That was probably like the last full episode I watched. Yeah.
Yeah, that's for listeners, John was watching the original Star Trek series. I don't know why, he just decided to. And
it was there. I needed something to have on in the background while I worked.
He bailed. Which, it's...
Which I'm not anti-Star Trek. I realize the value that show holds, especially in the 60s. But there were, when you watch a lot of episodes back to back, you see a lot of like similarities in all these episodes, and you're like, all right, they already had this 2 episodes ago, and they're doing it again. Yeah, so that's kind of one of the reasons I bailed. Yeah. Also, I didn't realize it was a 50-minute show, and some of those shows dragged a lot.
So, I know.
But yeah, but Clint Howard, right? Like it's going to be kind of, I mean, who knows what his character will be, whether we'll actually see his Clint Howard-y face, or whether he'll be, an alien or something, but or he'll be like some alien hotel concierge, who knows what he'll be. But considering he's both very strongly associated with Star Trek in that way, but also like he just pops up a lot in stuff, and you're always like, oh, that guy Clint Howard's in this. He looks like Clint Howard. He's never not like Clint. You never see him in a movie and you're like, wow, he disappeared into that role. You're like, oh, Clint Howard. So seeing him in a Star Wars movie is going to be a little weird, I think, because you'd be like, oh, there's Clint Howard. Yeah, he's in this movie now.
Yeah, and I have to be honest. I think that Clint Howard is the least of this movie's problems. Kind of going.
No, that's also true.
You're going to be so disorientated with, some Alden Ehrenreich being called Han and Donald Glover being called Lando. It's probably the fact that he shows up as the docking, as the guy who cleans docking bay 94 or whatever. You'll be like, whatever. But yeah, I know it's. Mm-hmm. I will say that I'm not. I can't say I'm like a Clint Howard fan. I don't have any problems with him, but yeah, there is a kind of like, oh, well, this is kind of the way genre entertainment is going. It's this kind of, it's the cinematic equivalent of. Have you seen this thing? It's been making the rounds on the internet. This picture of like this, I don't know, wooden placard that you can have in your house, and it's like, in this house we set our phasers on stun, and we one of those kinds of things, hope that the fortune will always be in your. It's just basically a screed of nerd things.
Catchphrases.
Yeah, and I'm that's the kind of stuff that just like, that's the cringe. The cringe comes in when it's like, you assume because you like Star Wars that you like Star Trek, and it's like, yes, I like both, but that's, I don't like, it's like I don't spend a bunch of time, watching the new Doctor Who, and just because I like Star Wars doesn't necessarily mean I'm like a Doctor Who fan. And it's just like that kind of, and whatever, it's a placard, I don't really care, but this kind of like, if he stands out, this thing, and if there's like maybe even a riff on the fact he kind of looks like the Tranya guy, then yeah, I'll be like, I'll be kicking the seat in front of me, because I'll be mad, because that's like, I hate that kind of idea that like, geek is a a thing, and when you're a geek you like all the geek things, and here's your geek news. It's like, you know, that's fan film territory. That is not something you do in a $200 million sci-fi movie that already has everything stacked against it. Everybody, you know, most of the hardcore fans I know have written this thing off, you know, so how they use him, it should probably be very sparing and I mean, that's the problem. Does Star Wars know how to do subtlety when it comes to that kind of stuff anymore? It's like, in some ways,
right.
The Ponda Baba, Dr. Evazan or whatever, should have been they walked past him and they were maybe pushing some guy you know, on the street, and they weren't a party to it, but instead Jyn actually like gets in the fight herself, and then it becomes this big ol' eyeball winking, wink, wink.
Yeah,
you know,
we'll see these gentlemen later.
Exactly. It's like, I think there was a I think George even did this. There's a deleted scene from the Phantom Menace where after the Anakin wins the pod race, apparently young Greedo, like, tells Anakin, I think you cheated, and then they get in a fight, and then somebody says something like, something's bad's gonna happen to you one day, Greedo. And you're just like, oh, I'm so glad they took that out. But that's the kind of thing that I feel like Star Wars has a problem with, and it's like, it should be much more subtle. But
yeah,
again,
right,
maybe
not everything has to be a winking, like, thumbs up to the fans. Yeah.
Although I will say, and I'm not gonna wade into these waters very deep. I'm just putting my toe into it. Sometimes, if you don't explicitly have these winks and the nods to the fans make them up themselves, and it becomes like a big argument, and it becomes this big controversy. So I don't know. And sometimes when I pick on them like this, I think, man, it's like, I feel sorry for him because nobody's going to be happy with it. They'll be like, there's not enough Clint Howard in this, you know, that kind of situation. So whatever. I would always advise, if somebody asked my opinion, I would always advise subtlety. Sometimes you can't always do that. So, I mean, whatever. Clint Howard, he's fine. But yes, it will be weird if he's not an alien or something. And this is the crazy thing, is like, to realize it's like, you know, going back to episode 9. Well, actually, no, going back to the Han Solo movie, we're just going to touch on the fact that now that they've moved everything back to May, it's like, they are so close to having to get this Han Solo movie out. It's not even funny. With this script not being solidified for episode 9 and them bumping it up six months or more. They must feel more confident about it than they let on, because why would they, you know? And you had said that some people had speculated that it might be that the summer release is a marketing thing because of it's easier for them to familiarize people with the toys and the ephemera that they want to sell, and I wouldn't deny that, but I just don't know if it's, you know, because they don't want to have it all out, all the good stuff out before the movie, and the movie comes out right before Christmas, so there's not enough time to give people to familiarize themselves. And maybe they're kind of looking at Rogue One and like how long those toys hung out. It's like, you know, I don't know.
I mean, I think there are several things going on. I think the received wisdom here is that Rogue One toy sales didn't do as good as, not just The Force Awakens, but didn't do as well as kind of what their expectations were going to be, and so some have speculated that part of that may have been because people didn't know the characters, right? With the Force Awakens, we got this, you know, whole build up to the movie, and you know, people were kind of slowly introduced to who these characters were a little bit through the trailers and through, you know, magazine articles and all these other things. so that when the movie came out, people were like, yeah, I absolutely want to be Kylo Ren for Halloween next year or whatever. Whereas, Rogue One, people were like, who are these? Are these Darth Vader might be in it, but who are these other people? And there wasn't that kind of clear build up to tell you who these characters were and why you should care about them. And so that was, speculation that may have contributed to why the Rogue One toys didn't do as well. And so that, if the movies come out in May, then by the time, the Christmas season rolls around, people will already have seen the movies and they'll fall in love with these characters. And I have to have, my slippers with, whoever's face on them. And I have to have my, various toys and games and things. And so, the original plan was for them to come out in May anyway, but, then they switched to December for a couple of years and people thought, well, maybe that's the plan now. And now that they're switching back to May, people are kind of going to try to find reasons to explain why they are moving off of Christmas, right? Because we had all those, does Star Wars own Christmas now? And then Star Wars was like, we're going to start releasing our movies in the summer. Thank you very much. And so, you have to understand why. I mean, the other reason people... I wonder if we'll get this. I wonder if this means we'll get a Clint Howard Star Wars action figure, which might be kind of fun in like a Constable Zuvio way.
Which I still see tons of those at Toys R Us.
Yeah,
for $20.
They're like the basic figures are like $4 on Amazon. I'm still waiting for the Black Series to come down though, because so another reason people speculated that the toys didn't do as well is because the Rogue One figures didn't do very well is because they didn't look as good. They weren't made as well. And so the Nerdist website had a thing. They talked to some folks who work at Hasbro on the Star Wars toys. And the quote from the piece is, Hasbro knows the human figures in the Rogue One series were a bit of a disappointment. So basically meaning, the Jyn Erso figure looked nothing like Felicity Jones,
right?
And so on and so forth. So it was all about how they're using this new technology where they basically take a high resolution photo of the actor and then just kind of print that photo straight onto the plastic, which is something that they already did for a few of the Marvel figures, for the Tom Holland figure and the Kurt Russell figure. And so, there's kind of this acknowledgement that, like, maybe the figures didn't do so well just because they didn't look very good. At least the humans, where the look of the figure, the look of the character actually kind of matters because you can match it up to the actor and go like, that doesn't really look too much like Donnie Yen, or Felicity Jones or Cassian Ann, Diego Luna. So another thing ILM is doing is they're, the very first wave of Black Series figures that came out circa The Force Awakens. They said they've been talking lately about re-releasing some of those where, they'll do some kind of greatest hits kind of re-releases or repackage beginning in 2018, some kind of re-releases of some of the early figures that, they didn't anticipate the demand well enough and for some of these figures. And so, they became really hot properties, and so you may have a chance to purchase those for all of you consumers out there. And then they also said that next year they're going to go back to the what they called super articulated, which I can only imagine is a technical industry phrase. The super articulated 3 3/4 inch figures, in addition to the basic 5-point articulated style that they introduced for The Force Awakens. So we'll get 3 3/4 inch figures with different kinds of articulation, which seems weird to me to do. Like, why wouldn't you just pick one and stick with it? But I don't know this industry very well and how that works. So you can probably shed more light on that.
Well, my limited experience, which is like, I still can kind of consider myself, I'm not two people, a neophyte about when it comes to this, because I'm making all the mistakes that the newbie guys, even though I've been had these toys in my house since I was 4, I'm just finally learning about the differences. And it's funny you talk about the kind of the Rogue One not being as popular. The funny thing with this, I've probably bought more of Rogue One toys than I have of any of the modern, save for that my frustrating thing with the 40th anniversary series, which I still I'm never going to be able to complete because I'm not going to spend $70 for an R2D2. But I ended up buying them, but mostly because the prices dropped. It's like I did buy the Saw Gerrera, I think was it's a fantastic likeness of Forrest Whitaker's thing, and that's only a 3 3/4 size figure. But yeah, I ended up buying a lot of them on clearance, and that's why I bought them that way, because I'd be like, I had this idea about like, maybe I'll do because people really, in the collecting, some people do these what do they call it when you make a little blanking on the word. Anyway, it's like you pose them and you make a little set for them, and I thought that might be
a diorama.
Diorama, thank you.
Not quite,
and it's like I was thinking like, I should maybe I'll play around with that idea, and so I bought a bunch for like to do like a Rogue One diorama. Although I haven't done it, maybe I'll do it in the winter or whatever. Also because I saw like some of the stuff that people are doing, and it's like, oh my lord, it's like light years ahead of what I had planned. And it's like, maybe it's like, I'd be like, here, I painted this thing to look like sand. Anyway, my point being is that I actually kind of enjoyed them. I still have them all in the package, of course, but it's like, it's like, I would agree that the likeness of Cassian isn't very good. And there's like there's like way too many sculpts of Jyn. Partly it was Hasbro's reaction to, rightly so, the complaints that there was no Rey figures for people that wanted them. There just seemed to be an under supply of them. So they really, but I don't necessarily think that, demand for one character necessarily translates to demand for another character, and they kind of overdid it. And so now there's like, 5 or 6 different, Jyn Ersos in different types of articulation, and there was they do like the 3 3/4 black series at Walmart, and so some of them have movable arms and some of them don't. And it's the toy industry is kind of in that kind of, they have to satisfy the perception of their line, like is there enough of these characters, then they have to balance that with like, is it going to sell? That kind of thing. It's like, right. It's great if they have, 5 or 6 different Jyn Ersos, but it's not so great if people are like, I only need one. It's like you have to have that. They have to differentiate it enough to make it be a thing where like for people that actually want to play with them, like they could justify having a different one. And what happens is when you have 6 different Jyns, it just becomes a collector's item. Right. And what you're doing is like, toy buyers or maybe people that, they're sitting around waiting for it to drop in price so they can just say, all right, I'm going to complete my set, but this isn't really something I like. I'm just completing my set. And, they've already had a leak of some of the new, because Force Friday is in September, I guess.
Yeah.
I forget what date. I probably will wander out and do that because I'd like to get my old man Luke figure, which I don't know if that's going to be. Although it's like I said, every time I get kind of excited about something, it becomes like, oh, that's the hardest one to find or something. It's like I just saw this for there was a Fen Rao, from Rebels. They did a figure, and I guess apparently it was only released in European markets. And that just kind of drove the American collectors just absolutely crazy because they couldn't get it. And then they, up until like last week, a Fen Rao, which for people who don't know, he's one of the Mandalorian, the Boba Fett planet characters in the Rebels cartoon. He's not even a big player, really. It's just he's kind of a cool guy with a jetpack.
He was a bigger player in the Clone Wars show, I guess. Yeah.
Well, his figure was going in upwards of $175. because people wanted it so bad, and it was selling at that. It wasn't like people are just listing it. No, it was selling for it. But now I feel bad for people that spent that much, because now Hasbro is actually doing pre-orders. They're going to make a better effort to release it in the country. So that can happen. It's like, things will be super rare, and then like the bottom end will drop out of it. But they, speaking of Episode 8, like I said, somebody leaked these figures, and it's, it's a pretty standard set. It's an old man Luke. It's it's a Paige, I guess. Is this a Resistance, which I think people say is Rose's sister, is in it. And I think
she's the pilot. She's the pilot. They should make if they ever do a Star Wars live action TV show, they should do a She's the Sheriff knockoff called like She's the Sheriff, or like She's the General. But yeah, so Rose is like the engineer or the mechanic, and her sister Paige is the pilot.
Although, and like this might fall into spoiler territory, so be before. My feelings is that that sister's not going to be she's not going to be long for this movie.
We've heard much more about Rose than we have Paige, so yeah, I'm with you.
I also think that if there's a sequence in the behind the scenes when they show a pilot falling into some kind of apparatus which has a bunch of like balls on the wall, like they look like little either thermal detonators or droids or something. I'm pretty sure that's that character, but I could be wrong, because she could be like this, like person that they're holding off because they know she's so great they don't need to tell you. So, but yeah, I mean, and I was listening to another show that focuses more on the on toys and whatnot, and they had kind of expressed that they had kind of Hasbro had changed their marketing strategy to try to get the more recognizable characters out there. Even though that they're not as exciting, they might be a little bit more boring. It's like, oh, there's another, it's a Poe Dameron, but, it kind of looks like he did in the last movie. And then Finn, and it's like, okay, well, he's wearing the same jacket, but he's got a different shirt. And there's Luke, and there's Hux. And it's like, there's not a lot of aliens, and there's no porgs or whatever they call them, or, these little nun figure things, like a 3-pack of, whatever the Octo Nun characters are. But I mean, I think that's partly because I think they don't want to have. I mean, they're trying to perfect that balance between secrecy and getting people what they want, and getting recognizable toys out in a good lead time before the movie. And I mean, I don't really know about the ebb and the flow of like releasing a toy in the early summer versus releasing it in the early fall. I don't know if that would lead to a lot of, I mean, I think you'd have to have a kid to know that. You'd really have to, because collecting is fun and everything, but I kind of always discount collectors, because that's not, if your primary audience is only collectors, then invariably you're just going to end up morphing into that high end, really expensive mini statue kind of collecting. Figures are supposed to be for kids, and you gotta, you have to have something that's going to appeal to kids. And it's funny, because every time I do a little, I hit the target for a toy run and see if I can stumble across something. It's like, very rarely do I ever have to like have a kid, be like, oh, pardon me while I reach over for the Star Wars. It's like, they're not really, I don't know if they're glomming onto these toys like collectors are. I think it's like that situation where it's like, there might be more 35-year-olds with these figures than 5-year-olds,
Right, exactly. I mean, and, with these, like, I really wonder how much kids care about, how many points of articulation, which, right, again, leads to like, so why are they doing 2 different versions, one with the 5 points of articulation versus the super articulated version? It seems like they are trying to split the difference between like making cheaper, more affordable figures for kids to have, who don't necessarily care, And then the collectors who do care, like, okay, we'll give you the super articulated ones. But I don't know how that works economically for them either, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like they're trying to, it's a lot of it becomes exclusives, and I will say on these figures, I guess there's some kind of force link or something. I don't even know what that means. And the show I listened to that mainly collecting, they weren't sure either, because they're like, we're not going to because they're already auctioning off like the first wave. Somebody got them early or something, and they're trying to sell them for like $1,000 or something, and nobody's. Yeah, I'm not buying it. I don't really care enough, and they'll be out in a month anyway. But
right,
the articulation, I mean, a lot of people do these dioramas, and articulation always helps. I mean, I normally would be like, I don't see what the big deal is, but when somebody really knows how to do that, it looks pretty cool. But again, I don't know if that's a kid thing. I think that's more, again, it's more of a collector's thing, and at that price point, they have them, like they're $13, $14. Whereas they did smarten up with this new line by, again, they had the Force Link, but I think that's like a chip inside the plastic. They kind of did away with the all the excessive like missile launchers and stuff that I think people are a bit like, kids just, if collectors don't really like that stuff, and kids, they play with it once and it breaks or they lose it. So it's almost like they were just like, it doesn't need to be there, and I think they kind of did away with it. So I'll be interested to see what I mean, that might be the toys might be more exciting than the movie. I shouldn't say that, but that's my anxiety, which we've discussed in depth today.
Yeah.
So,
and that's, I think that's a good place to wrap up.
If you want to reach out and talk to us in these remaining weeks, best thing is email us hosts, HOSTS @talkingbirdcast.com. We're at Twitter at talkingbirdcast.com. We have a website, which will still be up even after we stop doing the show. You never know. Stuff might pop up there. It's www.talkingbirdcast.com. We also have an affiliate link for Amazon. It's www.talkingbirdcast.com/Amazon. And it's just a nice way to help support the show that is ending in 2 weeks. So, do what you need to do with that knowledge. But again, if you have anything that you'd like us to cover before we say goodbye here near the end of the month, make sure you get that in early, and we'd love to get some maybe some questions or whatever to kind of close out the run, so maybe John doesn't have to write such a big long outline. He's a busy man.
No, or we started doing the show right around the time of the sale, before any of the movies had come out, any of the new books, anything like that. So, if you want to give us your feelings on how you think this current era of Star Wars is going, where Star Wars is today compared to where it was a few years ago, send us those thoughts, and we'll talk about that next week.
Yeah,
also,
I mean, I think I would like to hear somebody like have that kind of, because it's like, I know what I think, and I would love to hear what you guys think, because again, it's like nature abhors a vacuum, and I'd like some other opinions. But I think that's all we got for this week. For Talking Birdcast, I have been Robert Zachary.
And I remain John Llewellyn.
Thanks for listening, and may the Force be with you.